Welcome back to The Short Game, a show about short video games, games that respect your time. I'm Rated Kelly, and I'm joined by all my awesome co-hosts once again. Laura Nash, how you doing, Laura?
I'm doing terrific.
And Nate Heininger, how you doing, Nate?
So glad to be here.
And my bro host, Shane Kelly, how you doing, Shane?
Super good.
And this is episode 2 of our coverage of IFComp 2017. If you're just joining us, or if this is your first episode of The Short Game, first off, welcome! And secondly, this might not be the best episode to start on. Maybe go back a couple of episodes in your feed and listen to our intro to IFComp, the interactive fiction competition, where we kind of talk a little bit about what IFComp is, give an introduction to the competition and interactive fiction generally, and we got a bunch of links and other stuff you can check out there. And this is our second episode of coverage of the various games of IFComp 2017. There were 80 games, 79 games in this year's IFComp.
There were 80 and then one got DQ'd.
And so last week we talked about quite a few of them, and this week we've got a few more to talk about, and hopefully we'll be continuing this with possibly one further week of coverage of the competition as well. So what are we starting with? What's the first game we're talking about?
Insignificant Little Vermin. Because we have not been playing D&D recently, we all had to get our jollies out on this little D&D 15-minute IFComp piece.
Yeah, what a neat little game. I'm glad that you guys told me about this one because I was going to skip over it, and it surprised me with its level of polish.
Yeah, I think this is the one that the most of us played for this episode, and one of my favorite things I played for the competition this year so far. So the description is: escape slavery in Mount Bloodrock, an underground enclave of orcs and goblins preparing for war. What will you discover in these dark caves? What mayhem can you wreak on your way out? And how will your former captors remember you? Explore a simulated living and dying world inhabited by AI actors rendered through text. So that last line is what really attracted me to checking this game out. AI actors rendered through text. I mean, that's a very specific technical thing he's saying about this game. I thought to myself, this is not a Twine game then. This is not a parser game in the traditional sense either.
No, it's very much a game book in the traditional sense of like the old Steve Jackson games game books.
Or, yeah, and I've were those because Sorcery and 1, 2, and 3 were done by Inkle Studios and have some of this game book quality to them.
Yeah, those layer on. Those are great updates. Those layer on a lot of like, you know, visuals and stuff like this. This game is actually very similar in experience, I think, to the original game books, and like it's really nicely presented. The thing I like about it is this sort of continuous scroll of it. It works really well on mobile, which I've been playing all the games that I can this year on iPad, and this one worked super well there. You scroll down until you're presented with a choice and you pick something, and it does some things I've never seen in IF before, especially with the combat. So just like the old game books, where you would determine the results of the combat by actually rolling some dice.
Yeah, and if you're not familiar with those old-style game books, I mean, and I wasn't super familiar with them until a couple of years ago either, they are kind of a midpoint between a role-playing game, like a full-on D&D type experience, and the choose-your-own-adventure style book. They were a sort of a mid-'80s, maybe late 80s phenomenon where you'd play through this book that would give you a bunch of narrative sequences punctuated by combat, but the combat was much more involved than you would typically have in something like a choose your own adventure, where you'd be choosing, do you try to kick the ghost or run away from the ghost, that sort of thing.
Don't kick the ghost. Rookie move. You can't kick ghosts.
Don't kick the ghost. Here you've got actual simulated combat that seems, I mean, it's there are certainly some extremely complicated game books out there, but this is doing some things that are kind of very cool that I don't think would even have been completely possible in game books. And that is that when it says AI actors, what it means is that, when you get into combat, you're usually fighting you plus one AI companion against 2 or 3 goblins / orcs / enemy characters. and everybody gets turns, essentially. Like, it seems to be doing kind of under the hood a turn-based combat with all of those characters picking their moves and choosing their combat actions. But what I thought was really, really cool about it was that it kind of abstracts that so that it doesn't say, okay, now the orc is taking his turn. He's chosen to dodge. Here are the results. Now your AI companion is taking her turn. Here are the results. It presents to you the results of the combat basically as text.
Yeah, it takes the entire round of combat and presents it as a paragraph that comes out in a very narrative, it comes out as a successful paragraph. It doesn't feel like a cut and paste by a computer.
Yeah, something I really enjoyed was the element of chance. The dice rolls feel more like a slot machine. How probable things are. You get basically hearts and crosses, and depending on how you score, you can move forward. I really enjoyed how that felt like the chance of a dice roll, but it wasn't showing dice. I really appreciated that they abstracted just one more level. I'm also really curious how you guys did. I really liked the little wrap-up text at the end that said what you did accomplish and what you didn't.
Me too.
That's something that I never get in IFComp. You finish something, you don't know how many avenues were left unexplored. This being a bit of a dungeon crawler simulation, it actually tells you what you managed to do and what quests you didn't stumble upon. I booked it out fairly quickly, but I did survive.
Did you get the magic sword?
I got Orcthorn. I did not... however, destroy the iron monster. I got a sword, a spear, and a shield, and was in good health and exhausted, and my friend was wounded, but we all survived.
I am bummed that I did not play this one. I'm the only one here in the group that did not, and this sounds like it might have been my favorite. I do want to point out we have not said the author's name yet.
Oh, yeah.
So,
well, that's because I was nervous about pronouncing it, because I think it's a Czech last name. It's got the diacritics. It's Filip, I'm going to go with Hracek, or Hracek, possibly. Apologies, Filip. So he's, I think this is the first time I've seen him in IFComp, but he's apparently creating this system, which is called eGamebook, or eGamebook.com, that he's using to create this. And I get the vibe, although I'm not 100% clear on this, that this is essentially like this project, Insignificant Little Vermin, is sort of a prelude to some larger work that he's creating, both in this system and also in this world. It feels like a pretty interesting fantasy world that he's fleshing out.
Yeah.
Some other things I want to say that haven't been mentioned that I really liked about this game technically. Just the level of polish is number one, but it had
apparently he's a programmer at Google, by the way.
Ah,
and
oh, wow.
So,
Okay.
I don't think that necessarily means that he's got polish on all of his
Gainfully
work,
employed.
But, he's got enough chops to work there. So,
and it's there were some features that I haven't really seen in other interactive fiction. He used emoji to represent your character's like status. So you start off with just sort of a grinning emoji face to represent your health, and then kind of Doom Guy-esque, as you lose health, it turns into a frowning face. So that was kind of neat. And also the artwork was well used. Just, when it was introducing something interesting, like a new item or a new scene or a new enemy, it would just sort of drop a picture into the scroll. And you could scroll back all the way to the top. If you finished the game, as I did a few times by dying, you could scroll all the way back up to the start and reread all the choices you had made to kind of refresh before you start over. So I actually quite liked that as well. And one thing Laura mentioned, the reels, the kind of spinning slot machine that is sort of the dice of this game.
Yeah, very cool.
One of the things that's neat is lots of the items and things that you things that you pick up and so on would allow you to spend them later in an interesting way to re-roll or re-spin some of the slot machine wheels that you failed on. And you could, just by looking at the slot machine, you get a good idea of whether or not you have a good chance of success or not. So all told, this is the game in the contest that I felt so far had the best mechanics.
Yeah, I think it's a really neat system that he's creating here. I hope this is something that he makes available to other IF writers, because it seems like an interesting platform and that has a lot of promise. And I would love to play more games using this system. I'd also really like to play more games by this same author using this system. If he, continues and makes a bigger project with it, I think it'd be great fun to play.
Mm-hmm. He does cleverly include a info sign up to get on the mailing list for the full game of this at the end of the game, previewing his work. I think mentioning other things could be done with this engine. I'd love to see a non-combat version of this because I love it. Here it's very easy to see how this is made for pursuing and other things happening. I think this could be great with some other genres that are covered a lot, like mysteries, detective story, anything with menace.
Agreed.
I think it would be a very strong new engine if he opens it up.
Yeah, absolutely. And transitioning from Insignificant Little Vermin, a game with a custom engine and a very interesting custom interface, into another game with an entirely custom interface. Shane, I think you played more of domestic elementalism than I did. Do you want to talk about it a little bit?
Sure. I guess it kind of depends on whether you think I played it in the right way, because unfortunately I failed to complete this one. But Domestic Elementalism by fireisnormal,
which is like a really good username. So
yeah, it's a pretty good username.
And
it's
true.
It's a really neat web-based game that takes the kind of typical parser style of game where you've got your inventory, you navigate around, you move around and interact with objects, and it builds that in something that's much more akin to a Twine type of game. And so you are a witch whose witch house is broken. And so you are an academic witch, which is like if you want to get Reagan to like buy in on a world or premise, if you say the words academic witch, I'm in. I'm there. Okay.
I'm so in. Go ahead.
The only thing that would take it further is if you
it's
could
a dating
date.
sim where you can date academic witches.
Pretty
Listeners,
much.
do you have a suggestion for me? Write to info@theshortgame.net.
So the world of the game is pretty neat. I mean, it's very confined because you're just going through the rooms of your house, and for the most part, you really just have 4 rooms that are associated with the 4 elements. And your house is broken, and in order to get things back up and running, it becomes clear as you explore around a little bit that you have to fix some of the things in your house that are broken that are associated with the element of each room. And so every room has an associated element. So, for example, the kitchen is the fire room.
This actually gave me a little bit of Hadean Lands vibes, although on a much smaller and simpler scale. You've got this magical setting, and everything has these sort of arcane properties, and nothing is working as it should, but you're not sure why, and you have to kind of, explore around and try and figure it out. But unlike Hadean Lands, where there are, thousands of steps and like dozens of rooms. By the way, guys, Hadean Lands is super, super good. This is on a smaller scale that made it feel a lot more manageable. And the interface, like Shane said, is really neat. I kind of was reminded a little bit of last year's Detective Land, where it was kind of taking parser style of game and presenting it with a lot more of a sort of interface that made certain things like inventory management a lot more manageable. And that's something I hope we see a lot more of. I love parser-based games, but what I love about them isn't that there is no interface. I like when you take that basic sort of very free form playstyle of parser-based games and you add on some graphics and interface to help make certain parts of that process that would be otherwise kind of repetitive or fiddly easier to manage. And so
now, speaking of the interface, my problem with this game and the reason I wasn't able to complete it is, so I've said a couple of times on the show, I'm playing a lot of these games. I'm playing as many of these games as I can this year on my iPad. And for some things, I'm loading them into, a parser app. But for web-based stuff, I'm just loading it up in my web browser. And unfortunately, I can tell you, I spent much more time than I should have with this game. This is actually something I've done now a couple of times, where I've loaded up a game that was web-based on my iPad, and it initially seemed to work, but then I ran into problems. And in this game, unfortunately, the problem was not apparent for a while. I really enjoyed exploring the house, but then what I did not realize was I was not able to use any of the objects from my inventory, and I got eventually quite frustrated, and I looked at the walkthrough, and it turns out that I just simply couldn't do what I was meant to do in like scene 1. So I'd explored everywhere and tapped on everything, but I just couldn't actually achieve any of the steps of the puzzles. So that was a bit of a bummer.
Yeah. So when you told me about that, I tried it out in a desktop browser, and I didn't get. This was only just earlier today, so I didn't have time to really dig into this as much as I probably would like. So neither of us has really dug into the game, enormously deeply. I do kind of feel like I'm going to go back to this one. So I was able to actually use items, and the puzzles are pretty neat. Most of the puzzles involve collecting items in the various rooms of your house, and all of the items have an elemental association. And you can change their elemental association, which changes the properties of the item. So
very nice. Very, very Hadean Lands.
It really is, right? It's like Hadean Lands Junior, which is like great because Hadean Lands is really hard. So it's a pretty good set of puzzles from what I saw. I think I really only got through like the initial, maybe kind of first baby steps of it. But the presentation is really good. The setting is good. The writing is very, to the point and not super overdone, but good. I think this is a really solid game, and I intend to try to go back and complete it, at least enough of it to be able to, give it a vote. But if I had to say based on what I've seen so far, I'd give this a recommendation. I think it looks really cool.
So on a much less puzzly front, there's a game called Salt that's about 15 minutes by Gareth, Damian, Martin. And this game opens up. It's beautiful. It's very minimalist. It's got some very small graphic elements, very careful topography. It is creating a very set mood. You start hearing this music, and you get this call to start pressing the space button to swim. And you have this little progress bar that goes towards the middle, goes down, and before it hits the middle, you have to hit the space bar again to keep swimming, or else you're going to surface, come back above the water. This gives the entire piece this really rhythmic quality, because as you get tired, the bar gets smaller and smaller. You have to keep pressing space more and more. So as you're getting deeper in dives, you start kind of feeling like you're running out of breath because the pressure's on to keep pressing the space bar. And each time you resurface, you get this glimpse of the shore. The people are further away. It's very haunting, very mesmerizing. I, of course, decided I was going to swim and swim and swim until I couldn't anymore to see what happens. You might be someone who values your character's life more than I do, but I will say that it's poetic and minimalist and beautiful. I think something I wasn't expecting was how delicate it could be. Something you don't know until you start playing is that it's going to feed you only one line of text per stroke, basically. It's times. You get one line at a time, one sentence, one phrase, and they change out, not necessarily with each stroke, but about with each stroke. So you don't have any history. You can't go back and read this. You've got to, once you start playing, you have to keep playing. There's no pause button. It really makes it a very end-to-end experience. It's unlike anything else. I don't think a pause button is something you need in other games, but given that you have to keep moving in this one, you do. But it's unlike anything I've played in IFComp because of the constant input needed. It would be like if Eat Me required you to type eat every 5 seconds. Like, you don't have anything like that.
Yeah, you don't normally think of interactive fiction needing to pause. The game is they're generally in a constant state of pause until you put in your next input.
Exactly. And this one is, if you don't hit the space bar before the little progress bar hits the middle, you will resurface. Or not, like you basically are going to come up for air or go back to the shore. And it's like hitting a wall when that happens. The interface turns bright white. The music changes. You're at the surface of the water. And the story you were in when you were underwater, it's ended. You can't go back to it. It's a very interesting experience that it feels very designed and very curated in a way that I think made it just feel stark compared to everything else. And I think the text is really lovely. I would love to be sharing quotes, but I was hitting the damn space bar. And I think I wanted to know more. A couple times I just stunk at hitting the bar, because if you hit it too often, it's kind of like a stamina meter. So you could just keep hitting it over and over again so you never run out of breath, but then it's going to tire you out and shorten so you get less story. So you can risk it by hitting it the very last second so that you kind of maximize each stroke and you don't get tired. You can have a longer story. But if you're bad like I am, you might get 6 or 7 strokes into a really interesting story and then miss one because you're kind of chancing it to the last moment. So it's things like that make this feel much more, your choice is really how you swim.
Yeah, that sounds pretty fresh.
You can also press up and down at times to make decisions. So you're swimming and then you have a decision, which is literally going up or down in the water. Very different mechanically. And I think it felt much more immersive than it had any right to. At times I was thinking of Abzu, just because of all the lovely fish. But it's also, you're swimming away from people. And I felt like the decisions I was making to keep swimming away from shore changed the story. I'd love to play again with a more cautious take on the persona. I think I need a little space from it first because I really enjoyed my experience, and I don't want to know how much was recycled, but I really want to play again.
I think it's really interesting when games, and I actually don't think that you can see this very often with IF works, but in games when they use sort of the interface and control scheme to sort of be part of telling the story or help kind of immerse you
sort of
in
like
the feel.
like Brothers.
Yeah, I was actually just about to mention that because I think Brothers is sort
A
of
Tale of Two Sons.
Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons is the best example I can think of a game that sort of uses its control scheme as an integral part of sort of immersing you in the story and sort of actually makes the control scheme kind of part of the emotional experience of the game.
Yeah, like Octodad.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're basically the same.
And having just booted this up and looked at it a little bit, I could see where like this act of just sort of rhythmically pressing the space bar kind of helps mirror that feeling of, rhythmic breathing and motion involved in swimming. It seems like a really clever kind of way to, I don't know, immerse you in the emotion of an experience more so than just making text-based choices. So yeah, really cool.
Yeah.
Want to give this a try.
At times I was frustrated because I didn't get the depth I wanted, but that little is because I didn't get the depth in the game because I know there's opportunities I missed. I really liked the ending though. More of my ending.
What a way to add a element of sort of stress and like commitment to an interactive fiction game. I would have never imagined that you could get that feeling from a game like this.
Yeah, and I've never seen someone customize Twine that much.
Yeah, I wonder if this is Twine. That something that kind of I wouldn't say exactly annoys me, but like puzzles me about the IFComp page is that unless it's something really obvious, like they're using Inform or something, they don't generally say, like they have a format, but most of them that are using Twine or other even more, more custom setups usually just say web. And I mean, I'm the kind of nerd where I'm curious, like, did they make this with Twine, or did they make their own custom thing? Or, is this some system that I've never heard of that I should check out just out of curiosity? But yeah, I don't know. This one just is listed as web along with a whole bunch of other stuff.
Yeah, I think I had a note that it was from Twine from another reviewer, but I might be mistaken because the IFComp does not list it. That is correct.
Yeah, I kind of wish that
whatever
it did.
engine they're using, it is very custom though. Whatever they're using,
Definitely.
Well, I played something that is quite the opposite of that. I played Unit 322 by Jonny Muir. I believe that's how you say it.
I haven't seen this one at all, so tell me about it.
Muir. Yeah, it is a mystery told entirely through the pages of an online encyclopedia. So
yes.
It is exactly
academics this year.
Yeah, right. It is exactly what it sounds like. It is set up entirely like a Wikipedia page or any other sort of online encyclopedia. It's not like it doesn't look like Wikipedia as far as its layout. It's actually just text on black text on a white background.
I just found the title is Unit 322 Disambiguation, which is a word you literally only ever hear on Wikipedia because
yeah. Thank you for calling that out, because that's the homepage. You're on Unit 322 Disambiguation. That's the homepage. And so you land here and it just says Unit 322 may refer to, and then it has a list of things that it may refer to, just like we're used to when you Google or when you Wikipedia something super generic. So some examples will be the Unit 322 murder, which you can click on, an unsolved murder in Adelaide, Australia, or Unit 322, a covert German research unit active during World War II, or 3 minutes and 22 seconds, a song by American psychedelic rock band Unit. And might as well list them all. The last one is Reflection, often referred to as Unit 322, an episode of the TV series Unity. So it appears as if these 4 things are all super separate, and you can click on each sort of keyword like you would expect to in a encyclopedia page, and it goes several layers deep. I was talking about, one of them is an American psychedelic band, and there is a page for psychedelic rock and very, very generic things, very stuff you would expect, like I said, to see when you're on a encyclopedia page. But as you read, as you get further, as you click deeper and deeper, you start to uncover a deeper story and a deeper link full of intrigue. We're talking, World War II, spy, shades of MK Ultra, stuff like that, all mixed throughout. And it's really, really interesting. And it's the entire thing, except for a few parts, but I'm not going to get too spoilery, are written purely as generic encyclopedia pages. They are not, there's no narrative. You are discovering these links and discovering this story as you click down, as you go through different pages. It's really interesting. It reminds me a little bit of, I think Shane was talking about that game in the last episode where, the trick was that you could click on every single letter on the screen. This is another sort of play on a thing that we're all used to, and telling a story in a way that you wouldn't expect to. It was really interesting.
That's really neat. And I think it's kind of funny that this is essentially a faux Wikipedia page that has a walkthrough.
Yeah.
Having clicked through a few pages of it now, just while you were talking, I think it's almost indistinguishable from like a large text, blown up version of a Wikipedia page. It really has that vibe.
Yeah. But like I said, I feel like
I want to see what more there is to this. That's really neat.
There's some really good commitment to like the idea. There's several pages that, as far as I can tell, are only barely related to what the mystery is. So it's not like it masks the deeper story enough where it does feel like you're clicking on on normal Wikipedia pages. Now, that being said, it is not like super deep. It's, you start to pick up pretty quickly, like, wait a second, something's going on here. So they're not.
The whole idea of digging through Wikipedia also, I think, has this really nice feel alongside the idea of exploring a conspiracy to me. Like, you know, so I love it when the form and the subject matter of a piece of IF really work together.
Yeah. And conspiracy is a great word for specifically what it is that you're exploring. And there's a few parts that break the mold. Some of the citations that you get to are pretty much on the nose, kind of what's going on. But it's all good writing. It's all very interesting. It actually reminds me a little bit of, only in what it's trying to do, one of my favorite novels is called Reader's Block by David Markson, which is a whole novel which is just separate like quotes or thoughts or statements that seem entirely unrelated to each other. But as you read them and as you go on, it ends up being a really dense and deep story. And so it's using, like, it'll be just things like random facts or random quotes or whatever. And they feel like individual separate things. But as you get more and more into it, it's incredibly deep. This isn't exactly like that, but I don't get a chance to talk about that book very often. And so it did remind me of like using something that we're used to trick you into uncovering a story. And so it's fun. I definitely recommend it. I mean, you probably get through the whole thing in 20 minutes. The IFComp says 30 minutes. I think I read every page. There's possibly some stuff that I missed, but you know, I feel like I got it. So it's a fun little diversion. Definitely recommend it.
Cool.
Well, the next game that I played a fair amount of this time, and I do worry that I won't be properly doing this game justice by talking about it, because I am notoriously the puzzle dunce on the short game. But I decided.
Thanks for taking the heat from me.
Yeah, well,
runner up.
I decided to play The Wand by Arthur DiBianca, primarily because a couple of years ago in IFComp 2015, I played Arthur DiBianca's what was it called? Like Grandma Bethlinda's Puzzle Box, or Grandma Bethlinda's Mystery Box, something like that. And I really liked it. It was a parser based game. This is too. But it was a parser-based kind of puzzle box game that had a real sense of humor, but it was exclusively puzzles. You know, it had essentially no story. It was a puzzle solved in a parser, or rather, more kind of a series of puzzles. And normally, I kind of bounce off of things that are entirely puzzle-oriented with no narrative. Or are so like completely about their puzzles that, you know, basically, if the puzzles are hard, I have a hard time. But Grandma Bethlinda's mystery box, or whatever it was called, I may be getting that wrong, was really neat, and I remember really liking it a lot. And so I was looking forward to trying another game by Arthur DiBianca. He also did a game last year that I didn't play called Inside the Facility, but Inside the Facility did pretty well in the comp last year. I think it was the... did you play that, Nate?
Yes. Yeah.
I couldn't remember if we'd covered it or not.
I did play that. I'm sorry that I don't have a
that's okay. It's been a year.
But
it was an interesting kind of puzzle-oriented game where the only options you had in terms of interaction were moving and waiting. There was no like examine, and there was no like. I know this now because I read about it after you know, thinking, oh wow, I missed that game last year. But anyway, so this year he's got a game out called The Wand, which might be his most sort of in-depth, but also in a little bit of a way, a little more traditional than some of his other games. The Wand is a game where you play as, I guess, an intruder of some kind in a wizard's castle. When you get into the castle, the first time you touch anything, you receive a terrible electric shock, or I guess maybe spell shock of some kind. And there is a wand there. And if you pick it up and point it at a statue of the wizard who owns the castle, he comes alive, the statue does, and says, "Hi, I'm the wizard Bartholoco, and welcome to my challenge." And his castle has been booby-trapped against intruders, so you can't touch anything with your hands, or you'll get zapped. And after a while, it in fact it deactivates all of your verbs for touching things. You can't go around just zapping yourself. It actually deactivates those verbs. So your only verbs relate to using the wand. And the wand is a magic wand with 3 kind of rollers on it, or like dials, each of which has 10 colors on it. And so the wand has different actions that it can do
Reagan,
based
this is
on
already sounding too complicated for you.
You have a sonic screwdriver.
Right. It is absolutely that. And so the puzzles of the game mostly involve exploring the castle, trying to find combinations of colors, and there are hints to what combinations of colors do what all over the place. An early example would be that you're in a room with a locked door, and you, if you examine things like the couch, there's a purple cushion on it with the number 2 stitched in it, that kind of thing. But they get much more complex than that. You get these 3 color combinations, and depending on what you dial into your wand, they do different things. So, for example, the first ones you learn are red, green, blue, pointed at an image of a person, and that person will speak to you. Red, white, brown, pointed at something, and that thing will open. Orange, brown, purple will levitate objects. Yellow, orange, orange will fix broken objects, that kind of thing. And there are a lot of these. I kind of played around with it, trying to dial in sort of random. There are 10 possible combinations on each dial, so that gives you a ton of possibilities. So trying things randomly doesn't really hit most of the time. But I did find a few kind of out of sequence, and they were interesting without me being able to immediately tell what they were. For example, when I set it to all red, I hadn't figured out what it actually did yet, but it like kind of started blinking different colors. And it's like, well, what does that do? I have no idea. So all that is to say, I think this is a really incredibly polished, very puzzle heavy, very, at least on my level, kind of difficult parser puzzle game with a lot of exploration that felt almost kind of Metroidy, in that generally you would kind of find this, you'd find a new ability and it would let you take some very specific action to progress in the space, but then you now had a new kind of tool on your tool belt that could be combined with all of your existing ones to try new stuff. Very cool, lots of really interesting puzzles. It got kind of overwhelming for me, kind of fast. I was taking a lot of notes, but even so, it was kind of hard for me to keep track of all of the wand combinations, and it doesn't do that for you in game. I think probably my biggest criticism here would be I would have really appreciated it if the game automatically recorded the color combinations of the wand for you, and it doesn't. You have to keep track of that yourself, like on paper, or I just made a note on my phone and was writing them down. But I found myself constantly, I was playing this in the interpreter on my phone, I was constantly switching back and forth between my notes and the game, and it got really tiring. So I'm afraid I didn't get very far in it, or I'm not really sure how far I got. It doesn't seem like an absolutely enormous game, but I didn't complete the game, and I probably won't. Not because I don't think it's good. I think it's a really, really good game of this type. It's just I bounced off it personally.
Yeah, I feel like I'm having a hard time keeping track of what you're telling me about the game.
Sorry.
Let alone how the game actually works. But of course,
yeah, right. I'm sorry.
things.
I've already given up on this game. I've already quit in despair. Without ever having launched it.
I really hope that's not the case for everybody, because I think this is a great example of this style of very puzzle heavy parser IF.
And I'm definitely going to play it. I mean,
yeah.
Not saying I'm a glutton for punishment, but
you're a mystery hunt gal. You know,
yeah, I've done things that required whiteboards and entire rooms and 17 people in a room overnight to solve. So not that doesn't mean maybe I'm more patient than you guys.
Yeah, I think
you
that's
absolutely
probably
are.
Really.
I have the appetite for this kind of tracking. It is really helpful to know that they don't track for you, because it does change the place and context that I would do this kind of game in.
Yeah. Also, another thing I should mention about it is that while it has a kind of a light humor to it that I think is very, like, this feels a lot like Grandma Bethlinda's to me, in that there is a kind of a humor throughout. And occasionally there is dialogue with not actual like NPCs exactly, but like images of NPCs because you can bring them to life with the wand. And so there is opportunity for it to convey, story and character. And it's mostly this sort of like light humor. I would call it sort of family friendly in a sense. And that was working for me, just as Grandma Beth Linda's did. But unlike something like the game we talked about last week, the Wizard Sniffer, that just absolutely sucked me in with its characters and story, and gave me this enormous drive to complete its puzzles. And its puzzles were a little easier than this too, but it really sucked me in with that stuff. Whereas this is really, really puzzle oriented, and the humor is just there as a kind of a sort of a light dressing on top of that puzzle salad, if that makes sense.
Puzzle salad.
What kind of dressing goes on a puzzle salad?
Well, Reagan, to kind of take things in a different direction, a game where I think the humor was really at the forefront is a game, probably my favorite that I've played this week, is called Deshaun Stevens Shiplog by Marie L. Vibbert. Now, I wasn't able to track down whether or not she's written other IF. I certainly haven't seen her name pop up before, but when I looked up her bio, she has written plenty of science fiction, and I really enjoyed this one. The general idea is that, so first off, it's written in this style of a personal diary, and it's the personal diary of a guy who works as a sound and lighting tech on an outer space cruise ship.
Nice.
So as a part of that, it's written in this style that has the feel of something that's written for no one but the author, if you know what I mean. Like,
yes.
Like his grammar and his sentence structure is very kind of point to point, bullet pointy, and he's also keeping track of several things. Like primarily, his diary has two functions. One, it is his ship log, and the other, it is his workout log.
Yes.
And that gives you a kind of idea about who this guy is that he is just as concerned about how many crunches he is able to do as about the fact that they make first contact with an alien race. Yeah, so it's very, very funny. And so I thought there was a couple of other things about it. So first off, like just the writing and language was really what made this stand out for me. But there are several paths you can go through the game, and a few different endings. And there's also a good variety of interaction for this sort of game. This is a web-based game. In a lot of Twine games, it's just the click the word kind of interaction, and this one had a lot more going on. Like right up front, there's an interaction where you're presented with like a sentence, and you're asked to sort of trim it down to just the essentials. And so it's a sentence that's basically something like, life on a cruise ship in outer space can sometimes be tedious, and you click words to remove them until you get down to life is tedious. And that's the kind of extra interact. Almost every scene in the game had some kind of interaction like that. I really enjoyed a scene where you were being interviewed by the aliens who wanted you to explain various human idioms to them. And that was funny because it's all filtered through the lens of Deshaun Stevens' sort of bro-y, sort of dumb kind of mentality. I feel like I have known many people like Deshaun Stevens because I have known several sound and lighting technicians, and this is them.
Yep. I've dated lighting technicians, and that is them.
As a former lighting technician,
Nate is doing sit-ups right now.
Yeah.
So the other thing
Let's get me all hot and bothered over here. I gotta get
a very explicit set of goals, and you kind of got to evaluate how you did at the end. But the goals were presented sort of in the form of his New Year's resolutions, which were to get a new job and to find a new girlfriend. And so yeah, honestly, this is the kind of IF I really love. Really strong personality, really good writing, and really short. This is one that you can play through in about 15 minutes. So full marks from the short game. For this guy has a short game badge of approval from me.
Hey, yeah, we have to vote on those badges. We don't have a ton of those.
I looked up her other games, and she has 3 on her website, and one is 2 of them are about Cleveland. One's about finding yourself in Cleveland. The other one is taking over the world, but you live in Cleveland. And the third is called Space Princess Coronation. So I bet those are more of the same, considering one entire game is you want to take over the world. You live in East Cleveland. Here are some of your options.
I could get down with some Coronation.
Yeah.
I could get down with some Space Princess.
This sounds really cool.
But
Will
yeah.
you make it to Space Queen?
My favorite ending that I ended up with was he did find a new girlfriend, but it was an amorphous teal cloud-shaped alien, and
I hate where that happens.
And they seemed to sort of click a little bit.
We've all been there.
Kind of felt forced.
Yep.
You know, I have to say that I probably, this is very, I recognize this is very stupid, but I probably would have skipped over this one because it has no art on the IFComp page. And it only just occurred to me like how much that like subconsciously matters to me. Even games with like bad art, I'm like, well, I recognize what that game looks like in my head. If it's just the title, Deshaun Stevens Shiplog, like, you know, I have nothing for my like brain to hang on for me to like recognize it on the list.
Presentation matters.
Well, Reagan, I got freaking tricked by one. I'm going to talk about it later. That had real sweet art. So you're going to have to switch that heuristic off pretty quick.
Absolutely. So, oh, sorry, Laura, go ahead.
Oh no, I thought you were going to transition me into it.
Oh, I have nothing to do. I have no transition for this one.
So speaking of Hexteria Skaxis Quixmareth, no.
Not a science fiction game, although the name might confuse you a bit. It's a game about linguistics. It's not even about language. It is about linguistics. There's no way to say this without sounding pretentious, but it is basically the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis that the language you speak shapes your brain.
Yeah, I saw Arrival. I know all about that.
Yes, good. It's Arrival. It's nothing like Arrival. So basically, it's based on the short story about reading a book, but 2 people have kind of different sources and they conflict and they're having a conversation about it. But they keep kind of looking for different, words in the text and looking at more information. That's the original short story. This is, you're an academic and you're looking up a language, and what it says the language is based on is shifting depending on the texts. So in one, you might look at something that quality is the basic way you define it. So books might be called printed or bound or readable. In other places, they might be based on actions or names, so that you have different names for things depending on what concept your language is based on. So it is a game where you're kind of reading texts that disagree with each other. And one of the weird things they've done to play with this kind of mutable word language piece is you can click on words and change the syllables, and that becomes the name of the next language. So you look up a book, and let's say you've named it Quarth. You click on the next one and you might click on the syllables again, and the next place it's Quaith. So you kind of are changing the words as you go along, but every time you change the words, you pick up a different book and it's a different author who's gotten something a little mixed up. Yeah. You can even change the title of the game. So on the first page, they have the Hexteria as 3 different syllables, and you can click on any of them and change them to Skaxis or move them around. And I will say that some people had trouble figuring out how to beat the game. Tracking those syllables actually becomes important later on. Beginning is just a toy. I'd say the only thing that bothered me that was in a game that's about language and it's so elegantly designed. There's a lot of space. There's a lot of different Typeface is used for different things, and it's very dense. Sometimes there were no spaces between words, and I couldn't tell if it was because in the world of this interactive fiction piece, different understanding is one word, or if that was a typo. And I've been reading a lot of his Dark Materials because the new book came out, and Philip Pullman glues together words, and when he does it, that is the word as used as a single unit in that language. Could not tell. I couldn't tell if these were different words or if it was just like ancient city, probably one word. Lagomashis, one word. But sometimes like employing actions and the word actions is in bold and something you click on, but they're glued together. And I'm like, that's not one word if half of it's interactive.
That's anyway. the kind of only overthinking that you would only get into in a game that's literally about language.
Exactly. But it ends on a quote that I think actually sums up the whole thing. So if you like this quote, you probably like the game. Reality is divided into arbitrary categories by every language, and the conceptual world with which each of us is familiar could have been divided up very differently. Indeed, no two languages categorize reality in the same way. So if you were down with that sentence and that kind of academic ease, this whole story's like that, it's definitely a mood. It's not going to be for everybody. Don't do it after you've had a beer. But I think that it's trying to make a toy of linguistics, and I've got to respect that.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. It's another good example of kind of messing with the structure of IF and what you can do with IF.
And I know the space thing has got to be intentional, because you'll see like Shorsley Burgess, all one word. Like, I know it's got to be intentional. For me, I couldn't give it meaning, so it drove me up the wall.
I think this is like exactly the kind of thing that you can only do in something like Twine. Like this is doing more than you'd do with a similar kind of concept as a simple like short story or something. But you couldn't put this into another format. Like, I mean, you couldn't do this exactly in a parser, but you know, this kind of like language thought experiment, I guess, is something that feels very sort of interactive fiction, hypertext native. Like, it's a really cool idea. I have only kind of leafed through it just now, but I'm extremely intrigued by it. So
yeah, I have a hard enough time with parsers and knowing what word to type. I really don't need it to be a fake language of what I type into the parser.
And only at one point, it's just the name of the language and the region is what you get to change. And you might change just the middle syllable, you might change all of them, and then it picks up whatever you've named it and carries it forward. You don't have to track them per se. At some point you do have to know what syllables are, but they tell you. So, but it's about 10 minutes, yeah.
So the next game I played because I was about to get on a plane. I was coming back from Dallas. I went to a funeral over the weekend, and was coming back from the Fort Worth Dallas airport. And just before I got on the plane, I was like, I should download some games to my phone. And so I went through over the list and tried to pick out some games I could download into Frauds. So I was exclusively looking at parser-based stuff that would work on the iPhone interpreter Frauds. And so the first thing I came across was Measureless to Man, which is a good title. And it has a content warning: airplane danger of the kind that can exacerbate a fear of flying, thrills, and fantasy peril. And so I thought, perfect.
I made a joke about you playing this game. I didn't realize you actually did it.
Oh, yeah, I did. So I downloaded this to my phone and decided to play it on the airplane. And so I have positive and probably less positive things to say about it. But to start with, I think it's a first of all, it's very intriguing setup. So the intro text, the description on the page, you're on your way home from Cairo with nothing but a rumpled suit and an apple for lunch, but the plane passes through dark air over fathomless seas. Past the heavens, under the deep, there are secrets hidden in the crevasses of the world. Something is in you, longing to seek them out. And why not? Either way, you're doomed. And so it's very sort of Lovecraftian, I think. the game starts out with the initial scene. It plays out in about 3 or 4 scenes. So it's a fairly short parser game. It doesn't list a time on the website. I would estimate, I think I played for about an hour or an hour and a half. And I didn't see the ending for a reason that I will explain in a moment. But it starts out very intriguing. You are on an airplane, as it mentioned, and you have a few things in your pockets and you're strapped in. So you have to examine the items in your pockets. One of them is a mirror. And you realize from the description when you look in the mirror that you're wearing makeup and that one of your eyebrows is coming off. And so your first sort of puzzle is to get out of your seat and to collect your belongings and get to the airplane bathroom and try to fix your makeup. And when you peel off the false eyebrow, underneath is rotting flesh. So that's like that scene. I was like, I'm all in. This is great.
Hey,
that's sick as hell.
Finally,
sick,
we
right?
have a Halloween episode. Go on.
I know, right? So, okay, I was very, very in this at the beginning. I was fairly in it most of the way through, but I ran into a few issues. I'll go ahead and just explain them. First of all, I ran into some things that I'm not 100% sure are bugs, but I'm pretty sure are bugs. And some of them were total showstoppers, and I had to restart this game from basically the beginning a few times. One was just right at the very beginning. I got up out of my airplane seat, and it doesn't tell you that you have a bag with you while you're sitting in the airplane seat. And so I got all the way to the bathroom on the airplane and didn't have my bag with me. And it hadn't described the fact that there was a bag. And so I ended up spending a good long while. And understand, I was on an airplane playing this, so I couldn't easily check the walkthrough. So I spent quite a while trying to figure out what to do next. Eventually got frustrated and restarted the game because I tried at this point to go back to my seat and sit back down, and it wouldn't let me do that, or at least I couldn't figure out how to get the parser to let me sit back down in my seat. You can only pick up your bag while you're seated in your seat, but it will let you get up out of the seat and walk to the bathroom without your bag. But there's something, I won't spoil what, in your bag. Actually, I will spoil what. There's a sort of creepy, very H.P. Lovecrafty book that you're carrying with you that's very dark and creepy, and you need it to progress. And you can leave it at your seat and somehow never get it back. So I had to restart. And a very similar thing happened to me several scenes later, where I apparently left the book on the airplane after getting out of the airplane and couldn't figure out for the life of me how to get back in and had to restart again. So I had some major frustrations with what seemed like basic inventory management bugs in this.
I don't know, man. That could just be some real Lovecraftian shit about that book.
I think you're right, actually. And there were some other things, like it has this very interesting flashback sequence in the middle. It has some very, very odd parser stuff. Just a few weird things about it. There's a scene. A lot of things where you have to repeat the same command multiple times, but it doesn't signal to you that it's doing anything different. So, for example, there's one part where you're kind of floating in a kind of a blank void, and you see something off in the distance, and you have to go up and southeast, I think. And you have to do that like 15 times, and it gives you basically the same text every time. If I type up southeast, I get the exact same place description, and I'm floating in a blank void. I'm going to assume that I can't move because when I type in to move, it doesn't tell me that anything happened. Similar thing happened when I was floating in the ocean. And even conversations. There's a conversation with your grandpa in the game where you ask him, in a flashback, where you ask him about the book. In order to progress the game, you have to ask grandpa about book like 10 times in a row. So it has this expectation that you're going to figure out that you're supposed to. Those were all situations where I tried it a few times and thought the game was telling me, you're done, try something else. But actually, I was just supposed to try that thing many, many times. Sometimes it was a little more obvious than others, like the grandpa thing was a little better hinted at. But man, that really stymied me. And by the second time that I had to start the game over because I couldn't figure out what had happened to the book, I kind of gave up. So that's where I was at with it. I really like the sort of Lovecraftian. The setup, the initial scene is fantastic. And even the like subsequent stuff was pretty cool, but I couldn't quite get through it. I think it needs another layer of polish, if that makes sense. Yeah, I'll at least give it the thumbs up of like playing that first scene on an airplane. I was like, this is cool. So
I watched Con Air on an airplane once.
How did that make you feel?
I mean, I love Steve Buscemi, so
Sure.
pretty good.
Totally.
Pretty good.
You know, I know some folks are like, you know, and that's probably why they put the content warning on here. Some folks are, you know, nervous about flying and made more nervous by depictions of or descriptions of, you know, air disasters and stuff. I live for that. If I'm on an airplane, that is the best time for me to read about air disasters.
I don't know, dude. They might as well have put trigger warning inventory management for me.
Yeah.
But so I played a game that I definitely have been looking forward to talking about. Speaking of games where a bug sets you back, I definitely had a bug set me back on this one. Although probably not fair to call it a bug. Honestly, once again, I am being a, you know, guy with a kid, and I'm playing all these games that I can on an iPad. So this is a game that where I had some setbacks, but I really ultimately did go on to enjoy it. Transient Skies by dgtziea, perhaps. So Transient Skies, when I open it up, I'm a sucker for space exploration, and so this is a game where you are going from planet to planet and exploring and collecting minerals and all sorts of things. Really, this game is a note for note, especially the first part of this game. It is a note for note recreation of a game that I really enjoyed this past year, No Man's Sky. So did anybody but me on this show play No Man's Sky?
Yeah, I have it.
Yeah. So it's a game where you're, you know, wandering fairly aimlessly from planet to planet, collecting resources and exploring around and scanning creatures, getting credits, buying upgrades for your ship. And that's exactly what you're doing in this game. You're going from planet to planet, and basically you are interacting with, you know, you have a few different ways to interact on the planet. You explore, and then if you see something that's like a creature, you can scan it. Some of the creatures are hostile, and you can fight them. What's really weird about it, I've almost never encountered this in a game that was IF before. This is a game where you're really grinding for resources. There's like a serious grind to this game. And every few planets, you get a little vignette that gives you a insight into who you are and why you're on this mission. And, you know, but basically you're doing exactly what you did in No Man's Sky, which is head straight for the center of the galaxy, cruising from planet to planet with no hope of return. I don't want to get into like heavy spoiler territory, but eventually you do find a main planet that there's a couple of big events that happen. None of them are particularly, you know, earth shattering, but you know, you find a nice pet that comes along with you. That was entertaining, and the pet kind of comes up again and again. And you eventually find a planet where you're going to spend a little bit more time. Most of the planets you're just kind of there to scan things and collect some rocks and then take off and head on to the next scene. I've got to say, I'm not a huge fan of the grinding in this game. Like, grinding to me, trust me, I've played already probably 100 hours of Destiny 2. I'm a big fan of grinding, but it's not what I'm looking for when I come to an interactive fiction game. And what I ultimately got after the grind didn't fully feel like it paid off. So I guess that's kind of my criticism of the game. It does have some things that I think are really promising. I like space exploration, and I like upgrading my ship, and I liked kind of collecting enough stuff to upgrade my ship enough to explore new planets and try new things. That loop is a satisfying one, and it was fun. And learning more about my mission and exploring the reasons for me going on this long journey, that was also interesting. And you get to make some decisions that, really felt like they steered not necessarily the direction of the story, but they gave you the ability to comment on who you thought you were as a character, who you thought your character was. And I always enjoy that. So I don't know. This wasn't my favorite game that I played this week, but it was pretty good. Now, all that said, like I said, I'm playing this on my iPad. There is nothing more frustrating than starting over in a game and not realizing that you have started over. And the fact that it was so grindy, combined with the fact that on iOS, unfortunately, I've found that there are a lot of Twine games that just simply do not play super well with the fact that iOS will sort of reload things in the background. Like you might switch apps and then switch back, and then go back into your web browser, and then suddenly, the page has been reloaded. This game kind of masked that, so I spent over 2 hours in this game before I got to any of what I would consider the real meat of the story. Just tapping away, grinding, expecting there to be something. I think if someone played this on a desktop computer, they might have a better experience than I did. But yeah, be careful with that. I really should retire the iPad as a means of playing Twine and IF, because it's come back to bite me a few times. And for next week, I think I'm really going to have to.
Just to mention it, because I won't probably get a good opportunity to talk about it on the show again. If you're into space exploration, interactive fiction, the winner of last year's, I never quite know how to pronounce this, ZZ Award, the XYZZY Award, Superluminal Vagrant Twin, is a fantastic game in that same mold. It's a sort of limited parser space trading game done through a parser, and it is really excellent. It's a bit on the longer side. I think I played it for a good 3 or 4 hours, but it has a lot to do. And like, so if you're looking for a space trading game where you're flying around from planet to planet, upgrading a ship and trying to make money, completing a variety of different types of missions, that is another really, really good one to check out. I just finished playing it a couple of weeks ago, and I really, really dug it.
Awesome.
Yeah. Another thing that I will never, ever get to discuss on this podcast properly is that I fucking love space simulators.
Yeah, there's not enough good short game length space simulators, are there?
Sims of any kind don't lend themselves to short gaming.
Yeah.
Quick plug for FTL. Barely counts for what we're talking about, but
I guess that's true, man.
You did cover an entire episode on FTL.
We did,
I know,
indeed.
but that was like our third episode. I played hundreds of hours more since we did that. Anyway, well, I'm going to jump into my next game. I played a game called Swigian, which I actually looked up. As best I can find, it is Old English for to be silent, which is a very narratively perfect. This game is by Rainbus North. So it is a very, very simple parser, which is exactly the type of parser that I am looking for. It is even in itself calls itself a minimalistic parser, or a minimalistic game entirely. So the description, or at least the sort of tagline for this game says, "I don't like talking, let's build a fire." And the entire text of this game is exactly like that. Super short sentences, very terse, which I really appreciate. You know, I find sometimes frustratingly in a lot of these games, sometimes it just feels like people are writing for the sake of writing. It's all so flowery and purpley. I do enjoy a straight to the point sentence sometimes, and that is this entire game. You have a very limited verb set. The puzzles are very simple. It's really just pick something up in one room and bring it to another room, or like, hey, the armor is dusty, so you clean the armor. Like it's all pretty straightforward. There's a hint system where you just say help and it tells you what the next move is. Like it's really not about it being difficult. It's more about sort of a mood and a tone. And similar to the first game I talked about, as you go on, what's really going on slowly and surely starts peeking through the game. The short sentences stay the same, but maybe a few words start creeping in that give you a little bit more context. It reminded me a little bit of A Dark Room, one of my favorite games that we did from, I think it was 2015, where you slowly start learning a little bit more about what you actually are. So if you're looking for a simple parser, but one that has a surprising amount of depth in its minimalism, I definitely recommend it.
That sounds extremely my shit.
Yeah, and it takes about maybe 30 minutes. The walkthrough is really funny. It's just a list of the parser commands. It's not even like, it's just a top-down list of what you type in what order. Yeah, I recommend it. I had one part that I got stuck on because I feel like they missed a step in like the parser where the verbs, it didn't like my full sentence. It wanted just a single word. So when you're in a boat, and if you're having a difficulty with that boat, stop using the word boat and just say what you want to do. That's my only spoiler. Because I had to go look. That's why I know about the walkthrough, because I knew what I needed to do, but couldn't figure out what to type. But yeah, I recommend it. It's simple, it's quick, and it's deep. So check it out.
That's awesome. I played one more game that I can talk about a little bit this week, and that is a Twine game called Nyna. So this is, I'm not quite sure how to appropriately pronounce this. Nyna, like Nyna, lives or lives. I'm not sure which. It is about a cat who has 9 lives, and so it could be either Nyna lives because she does, or 9 lives because she has them. It's by Sarah Rhiannon Nowack, and basically anything that features witches on the list I'm going to play because that's my jam. And this one you play as the witch's cat. So the description text: the life of a witch's cat is no stroll in the park. It's more like a stroll through monster-infested woods, over temperamental streams, and across festering swamps. But you can handle it, right? And it's a pretty cute little Twine game. The premise is basically that your master, the witch, has told you to go and collect something for her, and you have to go through the dark woods in order to collect it and bring it back. And it's sort of about the little adventure you have along the way, most of which just amounts to kind of you making choices about, okay, will I, it almost sort of, Oregon Trail type of choices, like, well, I've gotten to a river. Should I try to cross the river on these slippery stones, or should I walk around it? Should I try to swim? Should I caulk the wagon and float it? You know what I mean? And so it not super complicated, very sort of choose your own adventure style. But I enjoyed it. It was really, really cute. It does have a little bit of a kind of, I wouldn't say twist ending, but it gets the story has some unexpected turns just towards the end. Not a whole lot to say about it other than that it's a nice, very short, maybe 15-minute little Twine game. The one thing about it that I thought was quite nice was that, being a cat that has 9 lives, there are many opportunities to die on your little trip, and you are... each time that you die, you lose one of your 9 lives, and it just sets you back to the choice before. And you can see, okay, I clicked on that one. Let's not try that one again. Let's try this other option. One thing that I thought was kind of interesting about it was about halfway through, I was like, I'm not actually sure if this is the same cat throughout. the whole thing. Particularly, there's some text quite just at the end that kind of raise that question a little bit more. Like, is this
the prestige?
Yeah, is this a single cat with 9 lives, or is this? Are we looking at a whole series of sad, fated witches' cats? She, even just at the beginning, she makes reference to the bad things that had happened to your predecessor cats. So it's unclear whether Nyna has 9 lives or there's just a bunch of cats named Nyna. But it was a pretty cute little game.
Sounds fun.
I think I'm a fan of anything with cats.
I enjoy a cat game where the cat does, I guess, get to live. Although I guess you like playing games where cats die, right?
This was no tag harem. But if cat death distresses you, this might distress you less than Chandler Groover's game, but maybe avoid it if cat death really gets to you.
Like a normal person, it would.
Fans of cat death will really enjoy it.
So for our last game, we have a little spreadsheet, a little behind the scenes peek of how people are, what people are playing and how they're doing. The status for this one, Shane, just says completely trolled. Would you like to talk to us about the dragon will tell you your future now? Because I'm very intrigued by the phrase completely trolled.
Yes.
As a status indicator.
So I couldn't mark this game as completed. There is, and I've known this, that there is somewhat of a tradition, I guess if you can call it that, in IFComp of troll entries, where there's a game that is put forward as a joke in some way, and I suspect that is what has happened to me here. So the dragon will tell you your future now. Reagan, I mentioned, be wary of games with sweet art and perhaps even sweeter titles.
It's a really good title.
I was so ready to have the dragon tell me my future.
Oh dear.
Yeah, so this game starts off really well. Like you are you're in this sort of waiting room, this antechamber, and there's a owl there who is working a desk, and there's lots of things for you to inspect and look at. And you have an appointment with the dragon behind this big set of doors. And pretty much all of the interaction in the game is you trying to get through those doors. And you can't. You have lots of ways to try, and none of them work. Not one. And I got really confused about this game. I spent much longer than the stated 15-minute playtime of this game trying to get through these doors. I tried everything. I tried it all twice. I downloaded the game as HTML and I opened it up to see
Oh my god.
if there was a way through, if there was any text that I'd missed in the game. And there wasn't. I'd seen everything the game had to offer, and there is no way through the doors.
Shane, I played this game for about a minute and a half, and I was like, "Oh, I don't have time for this right now. So I'll get back to it later."
I admire your commitment.
Yeah. So I had this whole arc of emotion from intrigued when you're in the best part of the game is before you even try the doors, which is when you're interacting with the owl who's gonna, escort you in, presumably. There's this whole moment that I really liked where there's like a magical lamp in the room, and if you look at it, it sort of leads you down this long series of bits of text as you cannot tear your attention away from this magical lamp. I thought that was neat. Overall, I thought the writing was good, but I cannot give this game a recommendation because, to me, you're not a short game unless you can end the game. There's no end to the game. It's a complete circular game. It takes you back to the same point every time, no matter what you try. For example, you're able to try and kick the door down, right? To get through. You can do a variety of different kinds of kicks at the door. to try and kick your way through. None of them work, but some of them look cool. You can try and reach through. The door it's open a crack, which is even more frustrating. Like you can reach your arm through the door, and the dragon will start to talk to you and say, "Hello, come on in." And there's you can try to squeeze yourself through that crack, but you don't fit. And one of the options is die of embarrassment, but you don't die.
That's so funny.
Yeah, that's actually sounds like a very successful troll.
I felt I've never gone to the extreme of downloading a game and trying to inspect its source code before. So that's successful troll.
Yeah,
successful,
highly successful.
So I just clicked. So the author of this game is listed as Newsreparter, and clicking through to Newsreparter's website, it seems to be a very serious gaming news blog called
"Fuck You, Newsreparter. Fuck you."
Informed, which features such totally factual articles as why the Xbox One X will only play classic Xbox games. The upcoming Xbox One X is touted to be the most powerful console ever, so why will it only play classic Xbox games? We spoke to 2 top Xboxers to get the scoop on what's behind Microsoft's strategy and what we can expect from the Microsoft Xbox One X.
Nice.
It seems like this guy is a very joyous troll, so good on him. It sounds like this successfully ruined your night.
Hats off to you, fucker.
And on that note, I think it's about time for us to wrap up. So we hope to bring you more IFComp in the very near future. We really, really enjoy doing these episodes. So if you enjoy them and like the show at all, first of all, there are many things that we want from you right now. Let us know what we've missed. If there's a good game or an interesting game that you've played as part of IFComp that we haven't covered yet, we want to know about it. We want to know what's interesting, what we ought to play, what we should be covering on the show. So please let us know. Secondly, we would...
Do you know of a game where an actual dragon will really tell me my fortune?
Please. Secondly, leave us a review on iTunes or tell a friend about the show. The best way that we have of growing this show, this podcast, is word of mouth, and that is up to you. Please, if you like the show and you think there are folks in your life, online or off, that would enjoy it in any way, let them know about the show and leave us a review on iTunes if you have a moment. We really do appreciate it. It's the main way that you can support the show. You can find our show on the web at www.theshortgame.net. We've got a contact form there. It's a great way to let us know what you think or let us know about games that you're playing. You can also find us on Twitter at _shortgame, and we're very active there, so drop us a line on Twitter. We are sure to see it. I have been Reagan Kelly. You can find me on Twitter at ReaganK. Laura, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Laura J. Nash.
And Nate, where can people find you?
Also on Twitter at NateSTL. I also want to quick shout out to those in the IF community who have already reached out to us. We've been getting, it's been great hearing from all of you. So
yes,
that's
absolutely.
Fun.
Thank you very much for reaching out to us. And Shane, where can people find you?
You can find me sneaking around outside of Newsreparter's house, trying to cut his internet lines, or on Twitter at 8BitShane.
And thank you so much for joining us on this episode of The Short Game.